Hello, everyone. I know a few of you are still connecting to audio, but welcome back. We're excited to have you all. As we have done the last few weeks, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please just put those in the chat and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. And without further ado, Professor Hardy. You're muted, Professor Hardy.
Yes, I am. I was still unmuted. All right, folks, no more fun games. Sorry. We've played with aquatic apes if you were here early, and we played with Bigfoot, which is all good and fine and all on the road to where we're going now. And yeah, down a rabbit hole. So hang on. Lots of stuff to cover. So here we go. I'm going to start this time with a slightly different thing. I've been starting with the same thing each time that we get there. I'm going to give you a slightly different. Sorry, if I can't see enough of you, I have a very hard time talking because I'm already doing virtual stuff. And all right. Are you seeing a screen with some text on it? Okay, good. So we're going to give you a few warning signs of pseudo-archaeology, where there is a lot. Being an archaeologist, this is not a good thing. But it also puts me in a good position to sort of talk about this stuff and make sure that we're not falling victim to where this stuff leads you. So warning signs to think of in pseudo-archaeology. Get over there. The claim goes directly to the media. You cannot find it in academic discourse. It's going to be put on TV. And therefore, it bypasses, if you think about the other criteria we've used, bypasses the ordinary channels of legitimization. Big archaeology. I'm trying to figure out what that is. I'm supposed to be a part of it. I'm not getting paid enough money to be part of big archaeology, but evidently big archaeology is trying to fool everybody, trying to suppress things. So conspiracy of suppression once again. Scientific effect is always at the very limit of detection if there is a scientific effect involved. And oftentimes it's just like, hey, doesn't this look like this? Yes, therefore it must be the same thing. Evidence for a discovery is anecdotal. Always, you had to be there. If you just knew what I knew, if you had seen these secret documents, you would be able to tell. Sometimes we have seen the secret documents and we can still tell. A belief is credible because it has endured for centuries. Just because people think the same stupid thing for a very long time does not make it right. The discoverers worked in isolation. This one's not always there, but often the person is doing all the work by themselves. Again, goes back to the anecdotal stuff. You had to be there to kind of see. And new laws of nature are required for an explanation. And just if I don't remember if I did this back in the first one or not, but if you remember, if I drop this here and you try the same thing where you are, it's going to work. You can try it. Gravity experiments, it's going to work. It's not going to go up. I'm telling you, it's not. All right. So we're going to turn to ancient aliens. Been on TV, what have they got now? 12 seasons plus. Been running for a very long time. Actually goes back earlier in this, and we got to introduce their cast of characters for ancient aliens because, of course, we've got these talking heads that are there all the time. So here's Ancient Aliens on the History Channel, or H2 or TLC or any number of other channels that purport to be providing you with some sort of knowledge. That's actually not the case. And so we can think of David Hatcher Childress. This guy dropped out of the University of Montana, Missoula at the age of 19, where he was studying archaeology, and he started his own business. And I got to give him credit. He's made a living off this by saying the same thing for some 30 years. Jason Martell. I don't know what this guy does. One time you're in a dating agency. He's a talking head on these things all the time. He's supposed to be an entrepreneur and an ancient technology expert, which means he says we couldn't have done this. Aliens did this, and they were experts. But anyway, my buddy Giorgio Tsoukalos, the man with the high hair. Giorgio was a sports information and communications major at Ithaca College. He was a bodybuilding promoter early in his career, and he was very much involved with this guy, Eric von Däniken, who is one of the originals, who kind of popularized this whole thing, wrote Chariots of the Gods, which is the English translation, back in 1968. This was picked up, it was in German. He's a Swiss hotelier. He had charged for fraud a whole bunch of times. 1973, NBC ran a documentary, quote, documentary, In Search of Ancient Astronauts. If you go back and watch it, it's not very different from what you see today, except the special effects aren't as good. It was produced by Alan Landsberg, of the undersea world of Jacques Cousteau fame, and early pioneer of reality TV and documentaries, and sets all this stuff up. All right, enough of this. Let's get to some aliens here. Just a second here. I gotta find what I need. Where is all this stuff? Okay, sorry. The bar is hiding on me, that's all. So into chat, I am going to give you a link, and I'm going to give you two different things to watch, two different time indexes. So here's the link, and then I want you to watch two time indexes here from a documentary from the Discovery Channel. There's the first one, and then we're just going to go ahead and do them both at the same time, because I want you to get the full flavor of what's going on. So I'm going to mute now, take those into a different window and watch away, and we'll be back in a couple minutes. right, how we doing? Everybody done? Yeah, okay. Um, where, where do I start? The chair that Von Daniken is sitting in. I mean, where the hell did that thing come from, and why is it sitting next to a pyramid in Egypt? I don't know. The guy is pretty shameless. He's been saying the same thing since he wrote Chariots of the Gods back in 1968. Go read it; it'll hurt your head. And yet it convinced lots and lots of people that this was something to kind of pay attention to. Now, I am not going to take the time to debunk all the stuff that they say humans couldn't possibly have done this. We actually, through the archaeology, know that humans could have done this, and in fact did this. And it's not that really terribly hard. It's a lot of work and takes a lot of people, but you can do these things. I will instead be being mindful of how little time we have, point you to this. If you really want to go watch a 3-hour documentary that took the time to go through and take all these claims and so, no, this is really what the archaeologists say, and it has citations and it has all this other stuff, but we're not really going to go there. Suffice it to say that if it's something that ancient aliens said, probably not really going to happen. But you know, I can't resist, even though I'm going to be even more pushed on time. I can't resist. You got to get a little Giorgio. You got to get a little bit of Giorgio in here. So I will ask you to watch this 3 more minutes here of Giorgio talking about the Bin stones, which is a little bit off the beaten path. You're going to love it. So we'll give it 3 minutes. All right, so clearly pyramids descended from the sky. People came out. And don't you love the guy that he's talking to and they cut away from him right after he's like, huh? What? What'd you say? And they cut away from him real quick because, you know, that's the way these things work. Okay, so what? So what? So we got this crazy show that claims all these silly, crazy things. Our ancestors, the dummies, is what they claim. We got the inability to make these things without extraterrestrial intervention. And I haven't even gone to the point where we're talking about upliftment, which is the breeding of extraterrestrials with past peoples. But when you really look at it, you need to break this down. And if you go through Chariots of the Gods, oh, I think I got to present the screen again. Y'all aren't seeing a screen probably. Maybe you still are. I don't know. I'm going to share again. All right, you seeing a screen? I don't know. I can't tell on this thing. Okay. If you break it down and you look at where this occurs, what you will see is that you have examples in Africa, in Asia, in North America, and in South America, and you have just two in Europe. Stonehenge, and usually I think it's, oh, what's the name of the place? Kayak over in France, where they got some other big stones. And so funny that white Europeans appear to be able to do this fine, but everybody else needs help from extraterrestrials in order to do this. And if you dig into Von Daniken, who has, by the way, published 29 books on basically the same stuff, particularly if you go to 1980, Signs of the Gods, you will hear the following, you can find the following quotes. The black man would also have to lose his curly hair and protruding lips, otherwise he could never become a white man. Is there a chosen race? Nearly all Negroes are musical. They have rhythm in their blood. Was the black race a failure? And did the extraterrestrials change the genetic code by gene surgery and program a white or yellow race? You will read that this is borderline racism. I have decided there is no borderline racism. When I'm being a little bit racist, I'm not really being racist. Forget that. It's just racist. And denying people a past is a long tradition of controlling people. Who controls the past? Who controls the narrative is huge. So we got ancient aliens. We got this happening all the time. We got things reinforcing all the time, running. That was actually from season 13, so I was wrong about the number of seasons. That was a newer one, the Bin stones there. And this and multiple other things running, particularly within the last 10, 15 years, on various sorts of programs. I try not to digress too far because we're going to shift gears now and we're going to take it a different direction, but we're still talking about who owns the past and who tells the story. And in this case, this is going to be a story about North America and who tells the story of North America. And it's going to be a story of bad archaeology and what happens to it or what you can do with it if you're not careful. So you might think North America, if you're peopling of North America, this is the sort of normal idea is you come from Asia over here across the Bering Sea, while there was a land bridge here because sea levels were lower, because glaciers were more advanced. There's some idea of an ice-free corridor that comes down here. More recently, there's an idea of a coastal route because we're not sure there was an ice-free corridor, and we've gotten some more early sites along some of the coast of Canada and Alaska here that suggest that maybe that's the case. But a while back, actually back in the 1930s, this was first suggested, but then revived in around 2000 by two people, by Dennis Stanford from the Smithsonian and Bruce Bradley from the University of Exeter, was this idea of a migration from Europe across the North Atlantic, across the sea ice of the North Atlantic, down below the glaciers, because again, glaciers are covering much of North America this time, and all the way down in here to sort of New England, Virginia, farther south, because you couldn't go into Canada here because it was covered in ice. And this is the idea of an ice bridge, or what is called a cross Atlantic ice. And what this relies on, if you think about early North America, the earliest stone tools for a long time that we've had in North America are these really amazing bifaces called Clovis points. These things are like a 1/4 inch thick, and they're about, they can be as much as 6 inches long, and they're bifacially flaked. I couldn't make one if I sold my soul to the devil. I couldn't make one. They're so skilled, it's unbelievable. And they have these amazing flutes in them. These flakes, if you see this flake scar here, and here's another one here, which is a really thin flake that's driven off this already mega thin biface. So to do this is incredibly skilled, and they're really great for projectiles, and probably were used in hunting large prey and all this stuff. But they seem, according to some archaeologists, to sort of appear out of nowhere, because if we look elsewhere, there's nothing like it. And I'll show you another picture of this in a minute. But Stanford and Bradley, reviving an old idea, said, hey, you know what they look like? They look like these things, the Solutrean, which is something that occurs in Europe about 22 to 28,000 years ago. By the way, the Clovis here is about 13.5 to 12.8. It's actually a very short time period. Solutrean is much older, and these things are also incredibly thin. They're even more impressive than what we had there. We had a cast of one of these in graduate school, and we used to use it anytime anybody had a birthday, and we called it the couteau de gâteau, which was the cake cutter. And we would use it literally to cut the cake, because it was as thin as a knife. It was unbelievable. And these are about, can be about 20 inches long, but they don't have any fluting on them. So you don't see any fluting here, but that's okay. It really doesn't kind of matter. So you get this sort of comparison. Here's a Clovis point made on obsidian in this case. And then here's this thing here, which is called the Sinmar biface, which I'll come back to in a minute as to where it is found. This is found in North America, and this is supposed to resemble this and come before this. Okay, so Solutrean is supposed to be the precursor now to Clovis. And they get here by coming across the Atlantic, following ice, and they come down all the way to North America in boats. And they do this because the ice shelf has fresh water, because ice is fresh water, and on the glacier type things. And they were hunting mammals, sea mammals, and all this kind of stuff. But there's more. So originally they say there's these Solutrean is pre-Clovis, but then they say, oh, wait a minute now. In Eastern North America, there are some more sites that we have, like Cactus Hill, which dates a little bit earlier. Cactus Hill dates to about 16,700, and it has a biface. This is one of the bifaces from Cactus Hill, which looks not terribly much like either of the other bifaces, but that's okay. And the stratigraphy is messed up, and the dates are not really sure, which is going to be a theme sort of here. But they say, hey, this still looks more like the Clovis point than what you see in Siberia. Here's what you see in Siberia. These stemmed points back about 25,000 years, and they don't look anything like this, which has the fluting. But the Solutrean, which has this thinning and these overshot flakes that go all the way across the piece here, that looks like this, and so therefore this must be. This, by the way, is an example of an old idea in archaeology called hyperdiffusionism, which is the idea that things start in one place and then they spread out everywhere else. And you don't get independent invention, you don't get new things being done. It's kind of like aliens coming down and saying, hey, we'll show you how to build the pyramids. And then there are pyramids over in Mesoamerica that the Mayans made because the aliens taught them, then they went over. Yeah, it's the same kind of idea. All right, this is so quick. I'm going through stuff so rapidly. So another big piece. Incoming message. Being told about an algebra test and the middle school tomorrow. Doesn't matter. The Sinmar biface, that thing I showed you, picture I showed you a minute ago, was found by a scallop boat. dredging off the coast of Virginia. And as it was dredging off the bottom of the ocean off the coast of Virginia, which of course with sea level would have been maybe on land earlier, pulled up a mastodon tusk at the same time. Part of a mastodon skull came up in this Scallop Boat with this biface. The mastodon skull dates by radiocarbon to 22,760 plus or minus 90 calibrated radiocarbon years BP. And therefore, according to Stanford and Bradley, the proponents of this hypothesis, this is also 22,000 years old. Hopefully, if any of you ever took any archaeology, you're at least going to know, wait a minute here. Context is a bit of a problem when you're dredging things up with a scallop boat and you say they're the same thing since a dredge drags across the ocean floor. But of course, the mastodon skull was really thick and heavy. And when the scallop boat hit it, they were like, oh, what's that? We'll drag this up and see what it is. That happened, by the way, in 1970. And the biface was sort of found by Stanford and Bradley, I think about 2008 in a museum in Virginia. And they talked to the guy, the captain of the boat. Another guy talked to the captain of the boat a month before he died, and he said that's where it was found off Virginia. Anyway, I'm glossing over way too much. I spend like 3 days doing this. But there's more. So don't just get caught up in bifaces dredged up for scallop boats, although I'll come back to that in a second. Dates. Oh, I'm not even going to do the dates. Actually, if you take all these dates from a couple of the other sites, here's the Cinmar Mastodon. If you calibrate them, it actually becomes older because radiocarbon fluctuates in the atmosphere and it's problematic. And the calibrated dates from North America actually predate the calibrated dates from Europe, from Spain and France and the Solutrean, which, okay, so this then is the precursor to North America, even though it comes later than North America. I guess if we're invoking aliens, we invoke time travel. Anyway, why not? Okay. Next. Mitochondrial haplotypes. All right, mitochondrial DNA, remember, is inherited through cells. It's extranuclear and it's maternally inherited, and you can look at certain stretches of DNA that are inherited together, and these are referred to as haplotypes, and we use this to trace maternal ancestry. And what you find over in North America is that you have, primarily for Native Americans, you've got 4 haplotypes, A, B, C, and D. And then there's this rare haplotype called X, and a version of that called X2A, which actually occurs sort of in eastern Canada to some extent. But if you look back into the old world, oh, here it is way over here in Central Asia. And we don't really see it here that much over in the rest of Asia. And all these others, A, B, C, and D, are over this way, and they're crossing over like this, so the migration makes sense. But X, it must have gone the other way because that's shorter. So it came from Europe across the other direction. All right. Now that you know that, you have to understand the next piece that comes in, which is this guy, Kennewick, Kennewick Man found in 1996 as a skeleton found on the Columbia River in Washington by some guys hiking in 1996. And looked at by a physical anthropologist, and I say that on purpose, not biological anthropologist, by the name of Jim Chatters. And he says, you know what? When you look at this skeleton, because he thinks it doesn't know how old it is. I don't have radiocarbon data yet. He said it looks Caucasian. It must be European. In fact, if you reconstruct it, this is what it looks like. And he did a reconstruction of this of what it looks like. And who is this? Well, of course you know who this is. It's Patrick Stewart. It's Jean-Luc Picard. Spitting image of Jean-Luc Picard. And clearly, Jean-Luc Picard was here 9,000 years ago, because that's how old this skeleton is. And he came from Europe. Or at least he was Caucasian. Okay. Typological thinking, it doesn't really work. We can't racially type skulls. It does not work. We still do it. Law enforcement still does it. They shouldn't be doing it, but they do. Just by the way, if you take a few other different assumptions and some more recent work, this is modeled after, if this were an Ainu from Japan, this is what they would look like. Not Patrick Stewart. which I'm sure Patrick Stewart is kind of upset about, but so all this stuff is bad archaeology. Bifaces, there are actually lots of bifaces that occur all up and down the coast of North America. They're from the Archaic, which is about 1,000 years old. And I told you that a lot of these sites have problems. And dredging things off the bottom of the ocean doesn't really give you stratigraphy. It just doesn't work. And so maybe we're kind of mixing these things up a bit. Oh, and just for fun, this is the boat, the Scallop Boat that Stanford and Bradley say was actually the one that dredged everything up, except that we had some other researchers, Aaron and Martin, who went back and looked through all the naval logs and said the only boat named Sinmar operating on the west coast, on the east coast of North America at that time in the 60s and early 70s was this boat here, which is a totally different boat and a lot bigger and had a bigger dredge. Anyway. So there are problems. There are problems, lots of problems. But so what? So what? So this is bad archaeology, and this is, but with good names behind them. Dennis Stanford from the Smithsonian. This carries weight. The Smithsonian is a big institution among science in North America. Bruce Bradley, well known, really knows his stuff in terms of stone tools, is a great flint knapper. University of Exeter, again, not anything kind of crazy. So maybe this is just bad archaeology and these guys are really into seeing similarities and they're a little bit like ancient aliens and maybe we shouldn't pay attention to them. And largely the archaeological folks have said, no, we don't really care. We're not really paying attention to that. This is not stuff we need to pay a lot of attention to. But this is not just academic. And it's what happens from here. So these are memes that show up related to this Solutrean hypothesis. We lived in North America peacefully for more than 5,000 years. Then the Asians came over the Bering Land Bridge, slaughtered us to extinction, and called themselves native. Complains about the invading white man, immigrated from Asia and wiped out the original white Solutrean settlers. So this is literally taken as there was a white lost race who was here first, and then the Beringians or Beringians came across the other way and killed them all. And so when Europeans got here later and wiped out the Native Americans, it was just kind of what they had coming. It was just kind of there. And it goes on. This is from a white supremacist named John DeNugent. Worldwide Solutrean pride, one people, one race, one culture. Americans are Solutreans because they came from France. He likes to use the fleur-de-lis. Very special of him. Then there's this guy, Kyle Bristow, who wrote a book, self-published a book called White Apocalypse. Now, Kyle Bristow started out at Michigan State University as president of the Young Americans for Freedom. And as part of that, he sponsored a Catch an Illegal Immigrant Day, which didn't actually come off. In 2016, he went to law school. He founded the Foundation for the Marketplace of Ideas, the unofficial legal arm for the alt-right. He didn't go to the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, but he represented people who were prosecuted for things they did at the Unite the Right rally. All right. Big deal, Okay, let me move a tab here real quick, move this to a new window and move this over here. This is a radio show called The Right Perspective, started by Frank from Queens, who was an infamous right-wing caller back in the 90s and early 2000s, got his own show. Here he is interviewing Kyle Bristow for World Solutrean Day. And who else has he interviewed before that? Well, we're not worried about that guy right now, but let's go down a little bit further. Oh, here's Jim Chatters, remember Kennewick Man. Jim Chatters showed up on the show. Oh, and who's this? It's Dennis Stanford from the Smithsonian, who also showed up on the show. I am sorry, if you were an archaeologist and somebody calls you up and says, hey, you want to go on a radio show? You should look and see what the radio show is. All right. And if you might notice over here on some of the other things that are said over here, I'm not sure if they're on this one or not. Talk Right. This is all about right-wing radio. I'll just read you something real quick from Frank here. Our great white Solutrean ancestors came here not 1,000 years ago, but more like 30,000 years ago. Skip over a little bit. Our ancestor, the Kennewick Man, was brutally slaughtered by the Beringians and his people also. They found a spear point in his hip. Please tune into The Right Perspective in the week of April 20th for World Solutrean Day. Please tell your children that our great white Solutrean ancestors settled this land and were destroyed. Ours were a peaceful people who welcomed the Beringians in peace and were paid back in death. And yes, I think this is what I need right here, just to you know, end up. That was from 2014 about. Here, what you're seeing over here is today, literally this weekend. Worldwide Solutrean Pride, World Solutrean Day, continuing to be celebrated here. We could talk about America Unearthed and Scott Walter, more Pseudoscience appearing on the History Channel. So what is the importance of all this stuff? When you accept pseudoscience, you erode the ability of people to say what is reliable knowledge and what is not reliable knowledge. Then anyone can spin a tale and people will believe it. And this has been believed by a certain segment of the right and the alt-right and embraced by the right and the alt-right. And they don't necessarily talk Solutrean all the time, but if you look behind the ideology that is present, it is there. And this is informing it. And if you have people like Dennis Stanford and others who don't stop and say, hey, wait a minute, that's not what we meant, then it just spreads and everybody's like, yeah, you know what? I thought I was right. I knew we were superior and I knew the whites had something over everybody else. So there you go. Down the Solutrean rabbit hole. And my head hurts because I've actually listened to these radio shows and it's horrible. So I will stop there. I told you we'd go quickly into bad places, so we did. I gotta open up chat here. Where do you go?
We got a question in the chat. So is the Solutrean story something those folks are referring to when they refer to blood and soil in alt-right spaces?
Yes, that is part of the Solutrean is blood and soil. It's a little more complicated than that. And to be honest, I didn't read blood and soil stuff this semester. But yes, it is tied up with that. It's tied up with myth of the mound builders. So actually this goes back to Andrew Jackson, and this was a common thing in early North America, in early US, there was a great white lost race that built the mounds and everything, all the sort of monumental architecture, Cahokia and Etowah mounds and all these other things. And it was all done by a lost white race, which he used to justify part of the Indian Removal Act. Same story, different people. Anything to get white people here first. This is the reaction I get from students too. It's kind of like smack you in the head. No other questions. Y'all are just, what, you're flummoxed, you're flabbergasted, what?
I have a question.
Sure.
So say hypothetically, convincing evidence of some amount of that direction of travel starts to happen.
Okay.
How do, you know, we as scientists convinced by evidence rather than whatever rhetoric try and like untangle sort of that from like, you know, what's been made of it before any evidence happens? Like is that?
So if you listen to like Dennis Stanford on his interview with Frank from Queens, you will discover that first of all, he's incredibly boring. He's just horrible to listen to. And second of all, you will see that he acts fairly clueless, and he says that no, there's no, he doesn't say that, because Frank doesn't say there's a genocide or anything. He just implies all this stuff. He says that probably there was interbreeding or something that went on if there was Europeans here in the first place. What is highly ironic about this whole thing is that actually, if you look at genetic data that we have from early skeletons in Europe, it's probably not until 4,000, 5,000 years ago, we think so far, genetic ancient DNA stuff is bad, that any kind of gene for lighter colored skin appears anyway. Because of course, light colored skin has only to do with UV radiation and adaptation to UV radiation and where you live, not with anything remotely related to who you are or anything about your intelligence or anything else. But that's, you know, beside the point. But that would be if there was anything, and it's probably impossible for that to happen, because that sea ice may not have been there, and to have enough to have been able to go across that at 20,000 years ago in skin boats or something like this, for which there's currently no evidence of any kind of seafaring or anything else in Europe at the time, is not terribly likely. But the point is what is done with it, who picks it up, and who takes this story. And, you know, I don't think that Stanford and Bradley set out with this idea in mind. I think they were way too old-fashioned and way too influenced by diffusionism. But when you see people doing this, and it does not take much effort to find people doing this and picking up the Solutrean hypothesis, to not then say in some public forum, no, this is not what we are talking about. We do not endorse this. That to me is problematic. And to go on a show like The Right Perspective, I could hardly make it through an episode, a podcast of this, listening to the Drin. The guy was so extreme, they wouldn't let him call into places like Rush Limbaugh. And so he started his own show because they kept censoring him. And then you're like, oh yeah, I'll just, hey, hi Frank, I'll be on your show. Just, the past is powerful. The past is powerful. The people who tell the stories of the past, whenever you get people taking over, you get old monuments being destroyed, you get new things, new stories being told. You're always telling a story. You're telling them, you're putting myth into place so that people listen to you and do things. And this is a perfect example of that. That's why archaeology is one of the most political things there is out there. Even though it seems very esoteric and, oh, we're just going to go dig up some old stuff and we'll talk about it and it'll be cool and we'll learn things. Yeah, but you're not the only one talking about it. There are other people who are taking that story and telling a different story. And that is dangerous. And that is why you've got to take responsibility for the stuff that you're doing and for what other people do with it. You're not responsible for what they do, but you're responsible if you let them do it without saying anything. And that, I think, is the Solutrean almost more than anything else. Although I'll tell you, tomorrow I'm doing Atlantis and Nazis in the class. And that all traces back. It all has a single origin. All the myth of bound builders is all mixed up in it. Solutrean wasn't known about that early, or the Nazis would have been fine with that because it's all coming from the north. And up in the north is where all the Aryans are. And yeah. This time of the semester, it is very hard to finish this class. I will be honest with you. I am now, we did, just like if you were here the first 2 times, we did aquatic ape, we did ancient alien, we did Bigfoot. We're like, oh, look at that. That's crazy. Look at that crazy stuff people are talking about, isn't that? And now we see where it leads, because it does. It is all connected. It is all connected. If you believe in Bigfoot, that doesn't mean you do this, but you can follow the lines and you can find the things, and you start looking and you hit a conspiracy and you do this and you do this, and they all cross cut. And I'm even finding more places that they cross cut all the time. And if you come back next time, we'll do it again. And we'll go deeper. Yeah, I'm not looking forward to it. I got to do it in the class too, but you can't turn away. You can't turn away from it, because it does make a difference. And this is the first one that I talked about that really does show up. And Kyle Bristow and Richard Spencer, if you remember him from a few years ago, like this, those two. Kyle Bristow, I think, actually withdrew from public life sort of in 2018. He seems to have decided, I'm done. Attacks against his family or something. I'm not sure. It's very unclear. He kind of disappears off the scene. I kept it thinking he was going to pop up in the Trump administration somewhere and be appointed a judge or something like that. Scary stuff.
We had a couple of questions in the chat that are kind of related here. Someone asked if there are any podcasts or blogs that counteract this white supremacist talk about the Solutreans. And someone else asked, within archaeology, how are people, institutions, or professional organizations dealing with this? And the people who promoted it, and especially thinking in context of racial reckonings.
So first, I would say that 2 places to look as to archaeologists and or other people that are trying to combat this kind of thing in general. There's a guy named Jason Colavito, same spelling as the olive oil, he only has a bachelor's degree. He was an anthropology major at Ithaca College, and he is sort of an independent scholar. He spends all of his time debunking this stuff and really going through, and I look at his website a lot. So Jason Colavita is a really good source for that. Andy White is another anthropologist who blogs a lot about this kind of stuff. So both of those things, both of those places are really good. In terms of the professional organizations and stuff, for the Solutrean, it's been a little bit weird because, again, Stanford and Bradley are not coming out and saying white people got here first, therefore white supremacy. They're saying white people got here first. Well, they're actually just saying Solutreans got here first. They don't say white people. Solutreans got here first. And for the most part, as this stuff came out, most archaeologists dismissed it because it was bad archaeology. And they were like, no, this really doesn't hold water, doesn't really make sense. There's a few people who have gone in and tried to do things sort of counteracting it, but that part, the part I showed you, doesn't end up in the archaeological literature. Now, beyond that, what archaeology is doing, there's a few people out there that are doing more to try to counteract the pseudoscience stuff. There's Jeb Card, who's at Miami of Ohio. There's Ken Feder, who's been a longtime author of Frauds, Myths, and Mysteries, which we use in the class. It's a thankless task. It drains you of energy, and you get very little reward for it. because the pseudoscience multiplies like crazy. And to try to, it's like a fire hose coming at you to try to knock any of it back. The little that we've done in class since we started teaching this class, this is second semester in a row that I teach it. When I finish this semester, I won't want to touch it. Literally. I mean, when you, particularly this part, you start reading this stuff, you start reading the vitriol that people write using this or even bad, even worse information. This is, at least somewhat based on archaeology. This ancient alien stuff is just made up, but it's ubiquitous out there, and it gets referenced and there's no kind of filter. And so that's what I can tell you, places to look to counteract it. There's more, but off the top of my head, that's what comes to mind real quick.
Someone else asked if the spear tips were the strongest evidence.
Yeah, but it's the evidence of this looks like this, therefore they must be from the same source. It's diffusionism, which does, and they don't really look that much like each other. They're both pressure flaked. They both have these things, and they're both really incredible skill, but it doesn't mean two different groups didn't figure out how to pressure flake, because we've certainly got other pressure flake things all over the place. The fluting is very unique to North America and doesn't last that long, I would guess, because nobody could do it after some people learn how to do it. Everybody's like, oh, forget that. That's too hard. I'm just going to stop doing that kind of thing. But there's nothing really that besides some overall morphological similarities between Solutrean and North American stuff that links those things together. And the dates don't really work, and the finds in North America aren't very convincing. And most of the earlier ones have problems with dating. There are all these coastal sites. There's all this reworking and stuff like this. One other thing that doesn't help that I didn't get to that I'll mention real quick is the way then the media treats this stuff. So fine, Ancient Aliens bring something up like this, or America Unearthed, which is a horrible pseudoscience show. But the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Company, on their show, The Nature of Things, which is their equivalent of Nova on PBS, they did a whole documentary called Ice Bridge on the Solutrean hypothesis with Stanford and with Bradley. And they've got some geneticists who are saying the opposite, but the way they cut it together, they're like, oh, could it be? Because if you look carefully at ancient alien stuff, people are we're just asking questions. Chariots of the Gods has a question mark at the end of it originally when it's translated into English. Oh, I'm just saying, could it be? Could it be this? Can I say it couldn't be aliens? No, not if I'm being honest. It could be aliens. They could be absolutely right, and aliens came down and did all this stuff. There's no evidence to suggest that at all. And it's much more likely, Occam's razor and all that thing being there, that people actually developed the technologies that were there rather than traveling who knows how many light years across space and time and doing this and then leaving after sort of helping us out. By the way, if you want to see craziness, keep watching that one UFO Strangest Things. You got Sasha in there, who's an intergalactic medium who talks to oh, it's not Sasha. It's Sasha's the alien she talks to. Lissa Royale. She's an intergalactic medium who talks to an alien from the Pleiades who was actually here and helped out with pyramids. And all you got to do to talk to Sasha is kind of go like this. And you're talking to Sasha. Well, if you're talented, I'm not. If you want to waste another 40 minutes of your life, you can watch that. Or just watch another Ancient Aliens episode.
I think we have time for probably one last question. Someone asked, do you see the legends of Welsh Prince Modoc in the Ohio Valley as a parallel to the Solutrean hypothesis? though more recent in time, another attempt to push right-wing racist views, or maybe a reasonable effort to find actual evidence as of Viking visits?
So the Vikings did get to North America. They got up to Anse Meadow and stuff like that up in Canada. They didn't really get down here. There's actually yes, I do see a parallel, and we actually just did stuff on the Newark Runestones, which were found an hour south of here, which have a Kenyan connection, because the Newark Runestones were found in the 1850s and were translated by George McCarty, who had graduated from Kenyon 3 years earlier, and was a priest, and they're supposed to be Hebrew and have the 10 Commandments on it, stuff like this, and it's all a hoax. And it's quite possible that he was the hoaxer, because he was trying to please his Bishop McIlvaine, who some of you will recognize as also the namesake of the McIlvaine Apartments, which the college owns. And so there's weird stuff there. But yes, constantly over and over again, attempts to put the lost tribes of Israel, the Phoenicians, the Queen of Sheba, the Welsh, the Vikings, anybody else but somebody who was actually here first. And in that way, somehow make it okay that Europeans came here and took over. So Kensington Runestone, Narragansett Runestone, you can go on and on and on and on about it. And yes, it does hook to the Da Vinci Code and problems there if you really want to get into other stuff, which I just did. I don't know how I keep this stuff straight. It's rabbit holes and rabbit holes. And I don't know. I'm sorry. It really does just fry my brain when I do this stuff. So, up for more. Come back one more time, and I'll connect it to even more current things. And beyond that, I don't know, because I might have discovered new things and new connections by the time we see each other in a week. Because, I can do this. Yeah, I can do this. No problem. No problem. I got this. Easy peasy. I'll just now go pet my dog and think nice things. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Bruce. This made me nostalgic for Neanderthals.
That would be fun. That is fun. That is not this.
Indeed.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.